talk further about the rescissions package as well as the recently signed Genius Act, we're bringing in Jason Sorens, Senior Research Fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. So Jason, thank you for joining us. First off, can you break down the Genius Act for us and what it means for the future of digital assets and cryptocurrencies?
The Genius Act provides a regulatory framework for stablecoins, which are cryptocurrencies that are convertible into a national currency at a specified rate. Right, so a lot of these are pegged to the dollar, so 1-to-1, 1 unit of that dollar pegged stablecoin equals $1. And they're useful because they allow people to convert easily between national currencies and cryptocurrencies. This regulatory framework provides more certainty so that a future administration is not going to be able to legally go after these stablecoins. But it does increase the regulations that they face, for instance, banning interest payments and requiring 100% reserves of low-risk assets backing those stablecoins.
So how significant would you say is the signing of this act into law?
It's quite significant because this is the first time that the federal government has provided a regulatory framework for cryptocurrency. And this is something that cryptocurrency companies sought. Despite the fact that it increases regulation on them, it reduces the uncertainty that there will be much more regulation and indeed criminalization potentially in the future of these products. And so this is creating a market that is going to be quite valuable. Again, stablecoins are useful for converting between currencies and cryptocurrencies. They're not really an asset that you want to hold on to because they're sort of like a checking account, an electronic checking account. But it is something that could be quite important for our financial system.
So President Trump was earlier saying that this act is going to make America stronger. Can you talk to us in the context of the importance of this act in making America a world leader in this issue?
Well, cryptocurrency is a new financial technology, and it has definitely a number of potential benefits. For instance, helps investors hedge against currency risk, helps investors, again, undertake electronic transactions quickly and easily. I think President Trump wants the U.S. to be a leader on a number of these technologies. This is an area where the Biden administration was very skeptical. In general, the Biden administration did not like financial innovation and wanted to regulate the financial sector strictly. So this is a move away from that toward allowing more financial innovation with the idea that this is going to benefit investors and ultimately the economy.
So you mentioned the Biden administration. This Genius Act received bipartisan support this time, with many Democrats joining Republicans to back the rules. But this wasn't the case last year when the Democrat-led Senate failed to take up similar stablecoin bills. So why the change now, by your analysis?
That's right. And I think what we've seen is that a large number of Democrats do support this legislation, but not the majority of them. And the Biden administration had a more kind of Elizabeth Warren style, kind of ideological hostility to financial innovation, with the idea that financial innovators are going to take advantage of investors and consumers. And they saw themselves as protecting the average American by clamping down on these technologies. But what we found out, especially in the election, is that a lot of Americans, especially young Americans, are quite enthusiastic about being able to participate in these markets. And that was a significant base of Republican support in the last election. So I think a lot of Democrats saw that, and they want to be part of this wave of the future.
Also, Jason, I wanted to talk to you about the package approved this morning of $9 billion in spending cuts. So the package removes roughly $8 billion from foreign and other programs, aid programs, for example, another $1.1 billion from the Corporation for Broadcasting, Public Broadcasting. So, Jason, how important is this? Was it important that Trump got these cuts?
It's incredibly important because you saw that Doge went in and canceled a bunch of contracts and tried to stop a bunch of spending. But legally speaking, they're not able to do that unless Congress authorizes it. So these agencies would still have to spend this money before the end of the fiscal year. And a number of courts, in fact, stepped in and forced the federal government to rehire workers and honor contracts and things like that. So this is important because it now makes those budget cuts law. And I think what you found is that the system worked as it's intended. Congress went in, they looked at the Doge cuts, they found the ones that actually made sense, and those are the ones that they authorized. So, some of the scare stories about, no more funding for, stopping AIDS and HIV prevention, those stories are no longer relevant because those cuts were not authorized. Instead, they really took a scalpel here and cut out the wasteful programs. I think PBS and NPR have been the chopping block for a long time for Republicans. They lean so far left, and there's really no rationale for the taxpayer to be funding ideological media in the landscape that we have today.
So, with $37 trillion, $36 trillion in debt, does this package go far enough in terms of cutting spending? What more should be done to lower the national debt?
Yeah, we absolutely need more spending cuts, and I think there will be more rescission packages that come up for votes. I certainly hope so. After all, Doge was active throughout the federal government. There are other agencies that had a number of wasteful programs, and Congress does need to act to, again, defund the waste, fraud, and abuse, and to get our debt under control. And when we look at these sort of what we call discretionary spending, we're not going to get the debt under control simply by cutting discretionary spending. We have to look at entitlements eventually, but it is very important to start somewhere, and this is some of the low-hanging fruit to kind of get the federal government under control.
But, Jason, some are saying that the spending cuts, specifically foreign aid, these programs are essential for U.S. soft power. What is your analysis?
Well, soft power is kind of a soft concept. It's really elastic. What does that mean? How do we measure that? What value does that actually provide to the American taxpayer? I'm open to the proposition that there may be some aid programs that are critically important to American defense. But when we look at how foreign aid actually works, it often doesn't even benefit the recipients. A lot of these programs, the money ends up being taken by public agencies and recipient countries. They become dependent on that money. They're not necessarily very efficient. They may have corruption in those programs. It makes them less accountable to their own people because they're deriving less of their money from taxing their own people and deriving more of it in foreign aid. So, on balance, on average, foreign aid is actually a negative, not just for the US taxpayer, but for a lot of recipients. And so this is an area that we definitely need to find efficiencies in.
So, Jason, earlier you were saying that we might see more spending cuts, more rescissions packages. Will that take money out of the U.S. economy in an extension? Will that slow down the U.S. economy?
No, because at the end of the day, what you are doing is returning money to the taxpayer. So we need to remember that your actual tax burden is really determined by federal spending and not what federal taxes are right now here today. Because we all know that that growing federal debt is going to have to be paid back by U.S. taxpayers. And with interest rates, especially where they are now, and interest on the debt rising, that future tax burden is rising, and that discourages investment. It discourages work. There's some evidence it discourages people even from having kids because they know that the future is going to be worse in terms of what people are going to have to pay back to the government. So to get a handle on that, to get a handle on that debt, we need to cut federal spending, and that is ultimately going to put money back in the hands of the U.S. taxpayer. And that should help the economy. It's going to lead people to be more confident about investing, about working, about earning higher incomes. That is going to benefit the U.S. economy.
Okay, Jason, just one last thing. Earlier, you mentioned discretionary spending. If you look at the U.S. budget between mandatory and discretionary, mandatory far outweighs discretionary, right? So how can you cut? Where do you even cut?
That's right. So these are your so-called entitlement programs. Social Security and Medicare are the two biggest ones by far. The Social Security, actually, you can solve with some pretty easy future-oriented reforms like stopping wage indexing of benefits. This is a fairly obscure thing, but it's very important to benefit payments, decades from now. And if we want to get a handle on that, we can start reforming that now. Medicare, one of the problems there is that we have a kind of old-fashioned health insurance model for Medicare where you're paying doctors per procedure that they do and per test that they run. And that's very inefficient. We should move to something more like a capitation system where we're paying them per patient and doctors are rewarded if they keep their patients healthy, but we're not giving them an incentive to run more procedures and tests. So we definitely need to get spending in those areas under control. I think we can do that without excessive pain to beneficiaries.
Well, okay, Jason, it's always great to speak with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.